Man, what the hell is going on in Dallas, and how does Nico Harrison still have a job? I mean, now with them off to a 3-7 start, being one of the New Orleans Pelicans' only 2 wins, and the fact that they keep getting hurt, Anthony Davis can't stay healthy. Unfortunately, I really hate to see that with them. They're a terrible offensively, being a bottom 3 offense in the entire NBA, despite having the number 1 overall draft pick Cooper Flag, a generational talent by many scouts and by pretty much every measure. They're off to a terrible start. And well, that has many people questioning, both fans and front offices alike, if they might eventually blow their team up. After all, they have a very veteran-led team. Not only Anthony Davis, but the currently hurt Kyrie Irving probably won't be back until around the trade deadline at best. Klay Thompson, so on and so forth after that. If they're not going to make the postseason, then it probably is best for them to blow their team up. I mean, maybe rebuild around Cooper Flag, Max Christie, and the few young talents they have on their team, acquire more draft assets, and build for the future, rather than trying to build around a dwindling Anthony Davis. Again, unfortunately, hate to see that with him. Kyrie Irving, who probably won't be back fully healthy this season. Maybe trade those guys and blow a majority of their team up, and look toward the future, rather than to the present, and probably fire Nico Harrison while they do it too. And well, if they would go that route, many reports seem to indicate that a team like the Lakers might have interest, possibly in a former Luka Doncic teammate, Daniel Gafford. This coming from Brett Siegel of Clutch Points, him saying that several teams continue to monitor Daniel Gafford, including the LA Lakers, if the Mavericks start trending downward and if they would eventually change up their team by having a fire sale and probably blowing their team up. So with that in mind here, if they would go that route, should the Lakers inquire about Daniel Gafford, maybe somebody else on their team, and what would that trade look like, or could that trade even happen? We'll talk about that, what the trade with the Mavericks might be able to look like, the possibility of it, and much more during today's video. But real quick before we get too far into it, don't forget to check out Underdog Fantasy, the best way to get in on the NBA action this season. And if you want to follow along with me, here's what I got going on for later tonight. For my first pick, I got Luka Doncic having higher than 8.5 points during the first quarter. Currently averaging over 11 first quarter points per game, I think he will get higher than 8.5. Then for my second pick, I got DeAndre Ayton having higher than 7.5 rebounds. Currently averaging over 8 and coming off a rather poor rebounding game, I think he'll bounce back. Then for my third and final pick, I got Herb Jones having higher than 8.5 points. Averaging over 10 per game, I think he will get higher than 8.5. So if you want to follow along with me, or make your own picks, then don't forget to check out Underdog Fantasy, and be sure to use code JSM to get your free pick, plus up to $1,000 in bonus funds when you make a deposit. But now getting back to our topic, and talking about the Dallas Mavericks and the likelihood of them making some trades, I really doubt they go the fire sale route. I doubt they trade Anthony Davis, I doubt they trade Kyrie Irving, after barely playing it all together yet. I guarantee they want to see at least a little bit of that together, but I wouldn't be shocked if they do keep going downhill, if they wouldn't trade some veterans like Klay Thompson, Naji Marshall, Daniel Gafford, Caleb Martin, at least explore their trade value, like reports say they're already trying to do with Klay Thompson. I wouldn't be shocked by that at all. But for me personally, I don't have much of any interest in Klay Thompson. A declining veteran that, although is a great and all-time three-point shooter, isn't a good fit for what the Lakers need in my opinion. I mean, sure, they're not shooting great from the three-point line right now, but that's not their biggest problem. What they need is more two-way talent on their team, guys that would fit with Luka Doncic and or LeBron and Austin Reeves, and pretty much prioritizing Luka here. That's what I'd be looking for via the trade market. I don't think they currently need much. They're off to a very good start, in spite of their terrible loss to the Atlanta Hawks. I think they're looking pretty good and they don't need a big dramatic trade, but if they can find value and value for a good price, then why would you not try to take advantage of it? So again, looking back in the direction of maybe a Daniel Gafford, the guy they've been linked to via this report, it might not be a terrible idea, I guess. I think their center rotations look pretty good up until this point. Ayton's played well, averaging over 16 points per game, 8 rebounds per game, over 1 block per game, and shooting very efficient from the field. Even off the bench, I think Hayes looked pretty good. Not the best backup center in the world, but not bad and definitely more than adequate for their team. Great fit with Luka Doncic, the best lob threat on their team, even decent defensively. I wouldn't say their center rotation dramatically needs help, but if Daniel Gafford could be available for the right price, then I wouldn't say no to it entirely. Again, depending on that price and depending what it would take to get him, that's how I would determine it and how my thought process would deem it through a trade. To even get him via the salary and make the trade work financially, we'd be looking at trading Gabe Vincent with either a Dalton Connect or maybe a Jackson Hayes if they want to go that route, and very likely their only tradable first-round draft pick. No, they can't trade Max Kleber here, can't trade him back to the team that just traded him away until 1 year later after the trade date. So wouldn't be allowed to trade Kleber until roughly that early February point when they made the Luka Doncic trade last year. On top of that, they're not going to trade Rui Hachimura for him. At least I wouldn't go that route. I'm not trading Hachimura, a guy that's played incredibly well for their team, is one of, if not the most efficient player on their team, and definitely apart from the centers on their team. I'm not going to trade Hachimura for Daniel Gafford. Not going to trade a wing player, which they really don't have many productive wings on their team, even close to a two-way wing. Not going to trade him for Daniel Gafford. Or on top of that, I'm obviously not going to trade Austin for him. I know some fans even tried to make that claim back in the summertime in July and August before he signed that new extension, or whenever he did sign that, meaning Daniel Gafford. I think that was ridiculous, and I still do. So no, not going to trade Austin, not going to trade Rui for him. But if we're talking about expiring contracts, then if for whatever reason Nico Harrison or whatever general manager they might have at that time would take that, then I guess we could talk. Again, if it would take Gabe Vincent, Dalton Connect, or Jackson Hayes with a first-round draft pick, then I would have a hard time saying no, especially if it would be Jackson Hayes. Then if we're kind of upgrading our backup center, upgrading it from Hayes to Gafford, then again, that would be really hard to say no to. However, do keep in mind that we will be trading for a pretty pricey backup center. After all, Gafford just signed a 3-year, $54 million contract extension, so if you're paying that to your backup center, a guy that might play at most 20 minutes per night, even at times would be battling with DeAndre Ayton, a guy that they kind of went out of their way to sign and would like to probably bring back to their team, then you're giving up quite a bit for a guy that's not going to play starting level minutes for your team, and that definitely is something to keep in mind here. Then on top of that, if you're going to trade their final tradable first round draft pick, are you going to do it for a guy in for a position that's not a dramatic need for their team? Again, I currently like their center rotation. I like Ayton, I like Hayes off the bench. That's not the biggest need on their team. What I would point to is their wing depth or maybe even their guard depth at this point, even though they'll get LeBron back and a majority of their playmakers and ball handlers eventually. I'd point to that kind of depth and I guess simply two-way depth on their team, not something they have much of, not something they'd really get with Daniel Gafford. Sure, I guess he's a decent two-way center, but it's not like he's a 3-and-D center, not a floor spacing big, and that's not something or a role he could fill for their team. Whereas a guy like Herb Jones, for example, I don't think they could get him, but kind of the archetype in the 3-and-D moniker, that's more so a need for their team that they don't have much of at this point. Yes, they have good defenders like Marcus Smart, who has been great for them, Jared Vanderbilt even, who's been solid off the bench at times, and they have good offensive players like Hachimura, Austin Reeves, Jake Arabia, who's kind of been a two-way player for them, but even him is not quite to the 3-and-D level that they would ideally want and probably like to have on their team. That's what I would call their biggest need, a two-way or 3-and-D wing, or even both for that fact too. So again, talking about their trade assets and that final tradable first-round draft pick, which I think it would take to get Daniel Gafford, given that we don't have a really young, highly valued player to trade here to get him. Maybe they view Dalton Connect that way, but I really doubt it. Given the fact that we're trading expiring contracts for him, I think we'd have to trade a first-round draft pick, and I don't know if I'd go that route. Again, love Daniel Gafford, is a former Luka Doncic teammate that fit very well with him on both ends of the court, but given that's not their biggest need, given that DeAndre Ayton's playing well, is continuing to form chemistry with Luka Doncic, and is a better player than Daniel Gafford in my opinion, not to mention is not paid what Gafford is at this point, I'm not sure I'd make that trade. Yes, I'd potentially be open to it for the right price, and maybe if Ayton or Hayes would eventually get hurt, knock on wood, then maybe, but it's not at the tippy top of my priority list. Or even apart from that, if they would in fact blow their team up or simply make a few trades, it's not like they have to trade Daniel Gafford. I mean, yeah, they could, but after all, they did just sign him to a 3-year, $54 million contract extension. On top of that, he's only 26 and just turned 26 not that long ago. Could theoretically be a part of a short-term to intermediate rebuild around Cooper Flag, or even if they would keep one of Anthony Davis or Kyrie Irving or even both of them, could still be a part of a short-term rebuild. So if they wouldn't trade him, is there a different guy apart from him that is not named Klay Thompson that we could still make a trade for? Maybe. Apart from him, I don't see PJ Washington being available. If he would be, I definitely would look into it though. Probably could acquire him for around the same salary price. Simply the Gabe Vincent and a Dalton Connect with draft compensation with it. Another guy they just signed to a contract, signed him to a 4-year contract worth over $100 million. So I kind of doubt they trade him. I doubt it would be for anywhere near a good price, so not going to think about that one too hard here. But I guess it might be something to eventually look into if they would kind of have a fire sale. However, apart from him and apart from those two, I think a more realistic target that actually would be within their price range and probably wouldn't take a first-round draft pick to get would be Naji Marshall. Another former Luka Doncic teammate, another guy that continuously talks about Luka and would like to play with him again, I imagine. Comments on his social media posts and even made a comment not too long ago about saying I miss playing with Luka Doncic. That's the guy that's a two-way-ish player. Isn't the best three-point shooter of all time, currently only shooting 25%, but in the time that he did play with Luka Doncic, played well offensively, is a great defender, even is a pretty good passing wing too. I think it would be a decent option for them, a guy that they probably are not too attached to, especially if they're not playing well and are trying to change up their team a bit. Isn't a high salary guy, isn't under a big contract, wouldn't take a ton to get him through a trade. I'd probably point to Naji Marshall as a realistic and a pretty good trade target for them too. And to get him, it only would take either Gabe Vincent or theoretically a salary like Kleber, but again, they can't trade Kleber to Dallas for a full year. But if you're simply trading Gabe Vincent, maybe a first-round draft pick swap, maybe 2 of them at the absolute most, I definitely think about it. Would give their team a big wing, Marshall being 6'7", don't do the dumb meme, don't do it. All joking aside here though, does have good size at the wing and can defend 1 through 3 and 1 through 4 on the court at times. Is a pretty good offensive player, again apart from the up and down 3-point shooting, averaging over 10 points per game this season, over 13 per game last season. At times can be a decent 3-point shooter, like during the 23-24 NBA season where he nearly shot 39% from 3. And from the corner at least is a little bit better, is a 32% 3-point shooter, not a ton better but a little bit. And overall I think he'd be some good wing depth for their team. In fact, I'd probably call him an upgrade over Jared Vanderbilt, being a little bit more reliable offensively, in fact quite a bit more reliable, and similar defensively. I would point to him as an upgrade that probably wouldn't take that much to get. But those are only my thoughts. I'd love to hear your thoughts about it. How do you feel about the Dallas Mavericks and them playing terrible up until this point? Do you think that will continue for them? And if it does, do you think that'll lead to them having a fire sale and being a big part of the trade market? If they go that route, who would you look to trade for on their team or maybe explore a trade for? Could it be a Daniel Gafford? Could it be a Naji Marshall? Or maybe a different player that I didn't mention? Let me know your thoughts about that and how you would navigate that route, or even if you think the Dallas Mavericks will continue to be bad. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. But I think that'll pretty much do it for this one. And if you enjoyed the video, then I'll greatly appreciate it if you drop a like, subscribe to the channel if you have not already, and hit that notification bell to never miss out when I upload a video. But as always, thank you for watching, and have a great day or night.